Hi, I'm Olivia Pike.
And I'm Steve Ferrara. Today we're discussing climate change and the effects it has on our world. We've been researching climate change over the past 3 months using C-SPAN clips, data we have analyzed, and articles that we have read. Examples of climate change we looked into include rising sea levels, pollution, population, change of weather, and fossil fuels.
In our first clip, we have Chairman Mr. Markey speaking about the various ways climate change has affected the Earth.
Gulf Coast cities washed away by increasingly intense hurricanes. Alaskan villages slipping into the ocean without sea ice to protect them from winter storms. And low-lying islands and coastal areas slowly losing ground to rising sea levels.
The chairman also speaks later on about fossil fuels and how the world's dependence on them can be fatal. And with the prices so high, it leaves Americans' economy open to recession. Many scientists believe that the only way to truly get away from fossil fuels is to switch to a renewable energy source, something like the electric car.
In the same video, Mr. Sensenbrenner talks about how renewable energy is the most reliable way to fight against climate change.
Energy and transportation technologies have the potential to lower energy costs, improve the environment, and end the world's reliance on unstable countries for energy fuel.
Christopher Horner, author of the Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming book, says how the warming of our planet is caused mainly by the mankind. He also informs us how our Earth has increased 0.6 of a degree since our last ice age.
As we know, the consensus is that we've warmed 0.6 of a degree Celsius in the last 100 plus years since the end of the Little Ice Age. That's the consensus. Greenhouse gas concentrations have increased. Man is largely responsible.
We found a chart that showed the annual average temperature in Boston from 1873 through 2016. The temperature in the year 1873 had an average temperature of 84.2 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas around 136 years later, in 2016, the average temperature recorded had changed to 53.4 degrees Fahrenheit. On this chart, you can also see the trend line and how it is visibly increasing yearly. There was an exception for a few years where the temperature surprisingly dropped. Since the temperatures were unsteady, it shows how climate change is affecting the temperatures.
The same organization also shows precipitation levels in Boston, like how in the first year recorded, 1872, the precipitation levels are around 50.27 inches. Then later recorded in 2016, the levels were recorded at 33.05 inches. These changing weather patterns are concerning due to the fact that not even that long ago, weather in areas like Boston were completely different because of the effect of climate change. This is also concerning because of the constant rise and fall of the sea levels that can affect things like when storms hit. The sea levels could rise, which means that there could be flooding and ruined buildings.
And better our understanding of climate change.
Okay.
So we came up with a few questions that we had for you.
Sure.
And yeah, basically that's it. So the first question is, what are some things that have happened to the world that you think are the most important to address and the first things that we should take care of?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the things that I think are most important to address specific to climate change, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So there are so many things. I think that's the reason that I'm sort of struggling to think of which topic to address is there's a whole bunch of things happening in a whole bunch of places as we warm the climate, right? And unfortunately, what we know is that the people who are being the most impacted, so the people that I think we should sort of address this issue with first, are the people who are in a position that are sort of least likely to be able to advocate for themselves.
Professor Burkholder explains how she believes the most relevant and important thing within climate change and how to fix it is not to straight away begin with the climate itself, but to get people with higher power and high positions to speak and advocate for those who are more affected without power.
When I say that climate change is affecting our lives by trapping the heat into the planet, which forces the temperature to rise, which will cause a change in temperature all across the world, does that strike you as accurate, or is it more or less serious than that?
That is extremely accurate. And so, and and it's backed up by data, right? So if we look at how our temperatures have increased since we started pumping more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, it is happening pretty much all around the world. There's one tiny little place that we've seen cooling, and it's an area south of Greenland. But if you are an oceanographer, which is my field, we know that cooling is actually happening because the Gulf Stream is not carrying as much heat to that area as it used to. But ironically, the reason that the Gulf Stream is not carrying all that heat up there is because the Gulf Stream is slowing down because of climate change, right? Yeah. So we know even that
Professor Burkholder tells us that our explanation of climate change is accurate. She also goes on to tell us that places like Greenland that are looking better every year are only looking better because of climate change, almost like climate change is lapping itself.